Hello. As we approach Christmas, I thought it would be interesting to look at the world events of the time of Jesus' birth that led to the fulfillment of three prophecies surrounding the actual event, the birth of Jesus Christ. This may not seem completely relevant to today, but bear with me. It applies completely to us today. Around Jesus' birth, God used the seemingly chaotic and disruptive events of the world to accomplish a detailed and organized fulfillment of God's plan. The first one I want to look at with you is Luke 2, verses 1 through 5, and we're going to read that. It says, "In those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who is with child." This first event that we see is a census. And so we see a command from Caesar Augustus to be registered for all the citizens of his kingdom. It was a 90-mile trek for Joseph and Mary that they had to make, and that would have been extremely difficult for most people, let alone somebody who is getting near to giving birth. And it required probably at least a week's worth of travel. And I think this greatly disrupted Joseph's and Mary's life, and it disrupted their organized schedule. Joseph's work schedule made him stop his whole business and move on. And yet God uses this registration to fulfill the prophecy from nearly 700 years prior in Micah 5:2, which, let me flip back there. We see in Micah 5:2 where it says, "But you, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient of days." So this prophecy of getting them, or this disruption of getting them, or the registration to get them to go to Bethlehem, fulfills that prophecy from 700 years before. The second event I want to look at is in Matthew 2. So go back there with me, Matthew 2, verse 13 through 15. And it says this, "Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, 'Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him.' And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, 'Out of Egypt I call my son.'" In this one we see an evil dictator rise up in Herod. And King Herod is jealous of Jesus in the future kingship that he's promised, and he's come to fulfill. And he goes to try and kill all the boys in Bethlehem, as we see later on. And Joseph is told by an angel to flee and head to Egypt. So God uses King Herod's wickedness to fulfill the prophecy also from about 700 years prior in Hosea 11:1, where it says, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son." So the third kind of world-changing event that was a bit chaotic in that day happens in Matthew 2:19 through 23, where it says, "But when Herod had died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, 'Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead.' And he rose and took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, and being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in the city called Nazareth. That was what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene." So an angel tells Joseph to leave Egypt and head on back home, but then this plan is modified by a dream, and Joseph is told, "No, don't go there. Go to Nazareth, because Herod's son is still alive, and he is a bad dude." So this is thought to be prophesied back in Isaiah 11:1. So if we flip back to Isaiah 11:1, it says this, "There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit." So how does that prophesy? Well, the Hebrew word for shoot or branch is Natsir. And Natsir has very strong ties to the name of the town of Nazareth. So he prophesies back in Isaiah 11 that he would become a Nazarene. Pretty amazing when you think of the chaotic events that happened that led to the fulfillment of all these prophecies about Jesus' birth. So what's my point? In our seemingly chaotic and disruptive world with the coronavirus, with quarantines, travel bans, riots, political upheavals, we serve a God that has demonstrated his ability to orchestrate his orderly, exacting plan through the apparent chaos around us. What may appear to us on ground level as chaos is actually accomplishing his precise plan. In hindsight, we would not argue that the plagues of Egypt had no purpose. In hindsight, we would not argue that the Babylonian invasion of Israel was an accident or it had no purpose for that, because Israel was out of God's plan. Yet Israel is outside of what God wanted his plan for them to be. Yet both of these probably seemed chaotic and scary to those involved. So, during our challenging times that we're in today, may we not forget that God is in control, and he's able to use the chaos of this world to accomplish his will. And I'm confident he will do so. If you flip with me to Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9, it says this: "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." And then in Philippians 4, 6 through 7, over there. In Philippians 4, 6 and 7, he says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." So don't be anxious about what's going on today. God is in control, and his plan will still play out. You have a wonderful day. God bless you.